morning. Start. A very good morning to all of you, my dear students. I hope you all are doing well. I'm your Lipsa Miss, and today I'm going to teach you about respiration in human beings. Okay. Have you ever heard about the term respiration? I'm sure you must have heard about it, right? So let's not directly jump into the definition of the respiration. First, we need to understand the basic difference between a living and non-living organism. What are the features of a living organism? What are the features of a living organism? I'm sure you all must be aware about it. Any living organism, the first and foremost feature of any living organism is that living organisms are made up of cells. That means they are cellular in nature. They are cellular in nature. Apart from that, they must have some life processes. What did I say? All living organisms are cellular in nature. That means they are made up of cells, and they must have, and they must possess some life processes. Okay. What are those life processes? Like growth, reproductions, okay, development, so many things, digestion, respiration, circulation. Okay. And they must possess some independent metabolic activity. Independent metabolical activity. Okay, what did it say? Any living organisms are cellular in nature. Okay, and they possess some life processes which are essential for them to survive. Okay, and they must possess independent metabolical activity. What are these metabolical activities? Metabolical activities are certain biochemical reactions that is occurring inside our body or inside our cell. Those help us for our growth, for our development, and other building mechanism of our body. Okay, which are essential for any living organism to survive. Okay. Next thing is, you all know that any living organism needs nutrition. Do you know or not? It may be a unicellular. Living organisms are variety type. You all are aware about living variety of living organisms. Maybe it a unicellular organism or it may be a multicellular organism. Okay, composed of many kind of cells. All the living organism needs nutrition to survive. Okay, why they need nutrition? For energy, right? Have you ever wondered how they are able to produce energy? Have you ever wondered about it? How this energy being produced from the food we eat? Okay. That's what we are going to study today. Okay, students? So let's start our chapter, that is respiration in human beings. Okay. So in simpler terms, the definition of respiration is the process by which food is broken down to release energy. Okay. There are so many, what did I say? Our body has so many different kind of metabolical activities. It may be metabolical activities like biochemical reactions. It may be catabolic reactions or anabolic reactions. In case of catabolic reactions, some complex molecules break down to form simpler forms with release energy. Okay, and this energy is being stored in the form of ATP in our biological system. Okay, you must always aware about ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is called energy currency of the cells, right? And this ATP or energy currency of the cells utilized in certain kind of anabolical reactions where few simpler molecules combine together to form complex molecules. So all these processes that require ATP, all these processes, those require energy molecules is being produced from the food by the process of respiration. So what did I say? Respiration is simply a process by which food is broken down to release energy. Okay, what did I say? Respiration. So what is the definition of respiration? A process by which food breakdown to release energy. In which form? Okay, energy is released in the form of heat. Okay, and some of heat is trapped in the form of ATP. That is the energy currency of your cell, which is present in the biological system. Energy currency of the cell, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. What is the full form of ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. Okay, or it is called energy currency of the cell, which is this ATP molecules further utilized by our cell for variety kind of activities that is occurring inside our body. Okay, so you learned about the definition of respiration. Okay. First, in case of human beings, today we are going to specifically learn about the respiration in human beings. And we human beings are multicellular organism. What did I say? We human beings are multicellular organism. Any kind of human body, there are so many of cells. For example, like around 37 trillions of cells. And all cells of our body are not in direct contact with the environment. Okay. In case of unicellular organism, where few cells are present, they are in direct contact with the environment. So they are able to get oxygen directly from the environment. But in our case, in multicellular organism, they are not able to get directly oxygen from the environment. So there are specific systems, specific mechanism that helps to supply oxygen inside our body, or supply oxygen to all the cells present inside our body. Do you all breathe, right? You all breathe. Has it ever happened that you can survive, or you have stopped breathing, you feel restless? You breathe all the time, right? What happens during breathing? You inhale air from oxygen, you exhale to the environment. So first we need to understand what is the basic difference between breathing and respiration. So simply breathing is inhaling air from oxygen and exhaling air. Okay. And you must be aware that we inhale oxygen along with some other components of the air, and primarily we exhale carbon dioxide. So have you ever wondered what is happening inside our body that our body needs a constant supply of oxygen? Have you ever thought about it? Why we breathe always? Why our body needs a constant supply of oxygen? And how this carbon dioxide is produced in so many quantities that it needs to be released out? Okay, how this carbon dioxide is produced? I'm sure you must know carbon dioxide is a kind of metabolical waste that released during different kind of biochemical activities. So there must be some processes going on inside our body that we need oxygen continuously, and there must be some waste product release, that is like carbon dioxide, that it needs to be released out through breathing. Okay. So what did I say? Breathing is simply inhalation and exhalation, which is a kind of physical and mechanical process. Okay, where certain organs are involved. Okay, we breathe through nose, right? Or if you are suffering from any cold, you can breathe through the mouth. Okay. But primarily we breathe through the nose, and it reach our respiratory organ, that is lungs. Okay, so taking air from environment up to the movement towards the through nose. Okay, taking air through nose up to its movement to up to the lungs. This part only involved in breathing process. Okay, so breathing is simply physical process where certain organs of our body are involved from our nose to lungs. But respiration is a biochemical process. What did I say? Breathing is simply a physical or mechanical process. Breathing is simply a physical or mechanical process, you can say. And it involves inhalation, inhalation of air, inhalation of air, and exhalation, exhalation of air. So what our body take from inhalation? Oxygen, and we exhale primarily carbon dioxide. Okay, we exhale primarily carbon dioxide. So breathing is a process where certain organs are involved, certain organ and organ systems are involved. Organ and organ systems are involved, right? Open kare. Okay. So in case of breathing, certain organs or organ systems are involved, like our respiratory system. You all know how organs are being formed, right? Cell, tissues, tissue system, then organs, then certain organs combined together to form organ system. Okay, respiratory system is a kind of organ system in our body. Okay. So respiration is a biochemical process where food is broken down to release energy in the form of ATP. But where this respiration is occurring? The respiration or this biochemical process occurs inside our cell. Okay, so it is intracellular in nature. What it is? It is intracellular in nature. But I just told you, in case of breathing, certain organs are involved. We take air from the environment to our system. So that means breathing is kind of extracellular, like we are directly contact with the environment. Food is still. So respiration is a biochemical process that is occurring inside our cell where food is broken down to release energy, and it is intracellular in nature. Why it is intracellular? Intracell, inside the cell, because respiration occurs inside the cell. That means these biochemical reactions occur inside the cell to release energy. Okay, we breathe to get oxygen from the air. Okay, but this respiration, this kind of biochemical reactions occur inside the cell. Okay, then in case of breathing, no energy is being released. Breathing is only meant to supply oxygen towards our cells. But here no energy is being released. Energy is released in case of respiration. Okay. Energy is released in case of respiration, because I just told you food is broken down to release energy. That means it is a kind of catabolical reactions. Okay. In case of catabolical reactions, when complex molecule break down to simpler forms and energy is being released, or you can say respiration is a kind of oxidative process where food is completely oxidized to release energy. Okay. So in breathing, no energy is being released. Where energy released? In the process of respiration, and this energy released in the form of ATP, that is the adenosine triphosphate, or energy currency of the cell. And another difference is, in case of breathing, no enzymes are involved. Okay, in case of breathing, no enzymes are involved. What are enzymes? Enzymes are specifically some kind of biocatalyst that regulate different kind of biochemical reactions that is occurring inside our cells, and these enzymes are kind of proteinaceous in nature. So these enzymes regulate the activities inside our, or biochemical activities inside our cell. Okay, so in case of respiration, as respiration are some kind of biochemical reactions, here so many enzymes are being involved. Okay, in case of respiration, there are so many enzymes are involved. So we learned the basic difference between breathing and respiration, right? Breathing is simply a physical process or mechanical process where we inhale and exhale. We inhale air and exhale air through our nose, where certain organs and organ system of our body is involved. But in case of respiration, respiration is a biochemical process. Okay, where food is broken down to release energy. It is a kind of catabolical reaction, or you can say it a oxidative process, where food is either completely or partially oxidized to release energy. And whereas breathing is in direct contact with the environment, it is extracellular in nature. But in respiration, as it occurs inside the cell, it is intracellular in nature. Okay, and in case of breathing, no energy is being produced. Otherwise, you can say energy is being used in case of breathing. Okay, why don't you breathe? You breathe, take a deep breath. Okay, you feel changes inside your chest cavity is being contracted. Okay, when there is contraction occurring in your chest cavity, that means some energy is being used. While you inhale, your chest cavity is being contracted. That means some energy is being used in case of breathing. But here, no energy is released. Where energy is released? In the respiratory processes. Okay, and in breathing, no enzymes are involved. But in respiration, variety kind of enzymes are being involved. Okay. So you learned about the basic difference between breathing and respiration. And I'm telling you another thing, that in case of multicellular organism like us, okay, we need constant supply of oxygen. So we breathe for oxygen. Breathing is necessary. Breathing is kind of necessary for respiration. Okay, breathing is kind of necessary for respiration. If you breathe, we get oxygen, and this oxygen is required. Okay, this oxygen is required for respiration. Okay, this oxygen is being required for respiration in case of human beings. Okay, oxygen is act like a fuel. Oxygen acts like a fuel so that food will burn, okay, to release energy. So we breathe to get oxygen. That means breathing is essential for respiration. Okay, just by breathing, energy is being not produced. Breathing is essential to supply the oxygen. Okay, when you breathe, we get oxygen. When our cells get oxygen, it respire and produce energy. So breathing is essential for respiration, and oxygen is like a fuel for the respiratory process, so that energy will be produced in the form of ATP. Okay, so you learned about the basic difference between breathing and respiration. Now we'll learn about the types of respiration. Okay, we'll learn about the types of respiration. So now tell me, do all cells breathe? My question is, do all cells breathe? Because there are variety kind of living organism. Okay, and some organisms don't possess any kind of organ system. Okay, there are some unicellular, multicellular organisms, as I have already told you, and it is not necessary that all organisms possess lungs or respiratory system. So it is a no. Answer is no, right? Not all organisms breathe. But second question is, do all cells respire? Do all cells respire? As I told you, respiration is a process, a catabolic process or oxidative process, where food is broken down to release energy. And energy is very, very essential to all living organisms to conduct a variety of life processes, variety of metabolical activities that is occurring inside our living cell. If a cell is living, that means it undergoes certain kind of metabolical reaction. It is undergoing certain kind of life processes for its own growth and development. That means if a living organism is growing, or if a living cell is growing, or it undergoing development, it needs energy, and energy is produced by the process of respiration. Okay, we eat, but those food is broken down to release energy by the process of respiration. That means every living organism or every living cells or organism require respiration to produce energy. So respiration is a universal. Okay, all living cells respire, all living organisms respire. Okay, that means the answer to this question is do all cells respire, or all living cells? Okay, all living cells respire. The answer is yes. Okay, all living cells respire. But this process of respiration kind of differ in every living organism, because some may need oxygen and some may not. Okay, we breathe for oxygen, and oxygen is essential for the respiration in case of our case, human being. But like other living organism, their respiration process may be differ. Okay, their cellular organization differs. Okay, cellular organization differ in all living organisms, right? So the respiration process will also be differ according to their cases. So here we are discussing about the types of respiration. So respiration is of two types. One is aerobic respiration and another is anaerobic respiration. So what is aerobic respiration? When the respiration occurs in presence of oxygen. Okay, in presence of oxygen, it is called aerobic respiration. You already know the definition of respiration, right? Food is broken down to release energy. The process of breaking down glucose in the presence of oxygen, and it occurs in the mitochondria and releases high amount of energy, around 38 ATP. So aerobic respiration is a process which occurs in the presence of oxygen. Okay, And in this case, in aerobic respiration, it occurs both in cytoplasm and mitochondria, right? And where more amount of energy is being produced. You can simply say, in case of aerobic respiration, the food, okay, food is completely oxidized. Okay, food is completely oxidized. Okay, the food is completely, food is completely breakdown to release energy in case of aerobic respiration, because here oxygen is present. Only in the presence of oxygen, food can completely break down to release energy, and the amount of energy released is high in case of aerobic respiration. And this aerobic respiration occurs both in cytoplasm. That means aerobic respiration will start in cytoplasm and it continue towards mitochondria. Mitochondria. Okay, you all must know, okay, about the cytoplasm and mitochondria. Mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. Why we call it powerhouse of the cell? Because it release maximum amount of energy, that is your ATP, energy currency of the cell, right? Okay, next come to the anaerobic. Anaerobic means absence of oxygen. Absence of oxygen. Okay, when the respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen, it is called anaerobic respiration. That means respiration can occur either in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen, like in case of lower organisms, right? Like for example, you can give example of some bacteria, okay, and in certain cases where respiration does not need the presence of oxygen, okay. But in case of anaerobic respiration, here in the absence of oxygen, the food is not completely broken down, or the food is partially or incompletely oxidized. Okay, in case of anaerobic respiration, food is not completely broken down, okay, or it is, or you can say it is partially or incompletely oxidized, okay, incompletely oxidized, okay. So as in case of anaerobic respiration, oxygen is absent and the food is partially or incompletely oxidized. So here the amount of energy released is very much of less, okay. As you can say, in case of aerobic respiration, around 36 to 38 ATP is being produced. But in case of anaerobic respiration, around 2 ATP is being produced. Okay, around 2 ATP. Okay, in case of anaerobic respiration, around 2 ATP, which is very, very less comparative to the aerobic respiration. Okay, anaerobic respiration, further we'll discuss about its types, right? Which is kind of fermentation process, and it is two different types, like lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation, which is seen in yeast. Lactic acid fermentation, like some bacteria like lactobacillus, and some other cases like human muscle cell during the strenuous exercise or activities, you can see lactic acid fermentation. So further we are going to discuss about that. So first tell me, we just learned about the basic difference and the types of respiration, that is the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, what did I learn? What did we learn? Aerobic respiration is two types, that is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen, whereas anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. Okay, aerobic respiration occurs both in cytoplasm and mitochondria, but anaerobic respiration occurs only in cytoplasm. Okay, occurs only in cytoplasm. Okay, aerobic respiration, where food is completely broken down to release energy, And in case of aerobic respiration, higher amount of energy is released, around 36 to 38 ATP. But in case of anaerobic respiration, as there is absence of oxygen, less amount of energy is being released, that is around 2 ATP, which is very, very less comparatively to the aerobic respiration. Why? Because food is incompletely broken down or partially oxidized. Okay, are you all clear about what is the difference between breathing and respiration and the types of respiration, that is aerobic and anaerobic respiration? I hope you all are clear about this. Next move to the next thing, the biochemical reactions. Okay, we just discussed, that is anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration, right? So you must have studied how you eat food, how your food is being digested in your digestive system. Okay, how your food is being absorbed in small intestine, right? Can you all able to remember it? Okay. You ate food, your food is being digested and it get absorbed in the small intestine, right? In small intestine, there are various kind of villi-like structures. Okay, in small intestine you can find villi, okay, finger-like projections that increase the surface area of the small intestine. Okay, and in all these villi are continuously supplied with blood vessels which absorb the nutrients or the food particles from the villi to the blood vessel, and that blood vessels which carrying blood carry those nutrients to all parts of the cells, right? Okay, from this small intestine or the villi portion, nutrition or food is being supplied. Food is being supplied by blood or blood vessels to all cells, of our body, right? Okay, now the nutrition has been reached to all cells of our body. So once the cells get food, that is your glucose. Okay, once the cell get food, which is glucose, okay, which is a 6-carbon compound. Glucose, once the cell gets glucose, which is a 6-carbon compound, it is being converted to the pyruvate. Okay, glucose is being converted to the pyruvate and it release energy, around kind of 2 ATP is being released. Okay, in case of anaerobic respiration, okay, the first glucose is being oxidized and this process occurs inside the cytoplasm. This process occurs inside the cytoplasm. Okay, this process, glucose being converted into pyruvate, which is a kind of universal process and occurs in all living cells, and this process occurs inside the cytoplasm. Here, glucose is first broken down into pyruvate in the cytoplasm. Depending on the oxygen level, pyruvate follows 3 paths. Absence, that is in case of waste, then muscles where lack of oxygen occurs, and in the presence of oxygen, it will be further moved towards the mitochondria. Okay. So after in cytoplasm, glucose is being oxidized to pyruvate. Okay. Then this pyruvate, in presence of oxygen, okay, in presence of oxygen, it will enter the mitochondria and release carbon dioxide, water and energy. Okay, so now you are all able to understand how carbon dioxide is formed. How carbon dioxide is being formed by this process of respiration. Okay, once your cell get food, that is glucose, first it is oxidized into the pyruvate, okay, which is a kind of 3-carbon molecule. Glucose is 6-carbon molecule, C6H12O6. Pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. Okay, and this step occurs in cytoplasm and it occurs in this process, this step. Up to this step, it is kind of similar in all living organisms. Okay, If there is, after pyruvate is formed, if the cell gets oxygen, if there is presence of oxygen, then it will further enter into the mitochondria, and there the food is completely oxidized, okay, completely broken down to release vast amount of energy. Along with that, it releases metabolical waste, that is carbon dioxide and some water. So this carbon dioxide is a metabolical waste. This carbon dioxide is kind of a metabolical waste which is released by all cells of our body. So if there will be so many of carbon dioxide, our body needs to release it out. So how it is being released? By our exhalation, right? By exhalation, we release all the carbon dioxide from our body. Okay. So this is in the presence of oxygen. That means this part is the aerobic respiration. This part is aerobic respiration reaction. Okay. This is the aerobic respiration reaction. Glucose is converted into pyruvate, then in presence of oxygen, completely oxidized to form carbon dioxide, water and energy, right? If there is absence of oxygen, complete absence of oxygen, then pyruvate is being converted to the ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. Okay. If there is completely absence of oxygen, then this pyruvate is being converted to the ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy, and this process is called alcoholic fermentation. What is it called? Alcoholic fermentation. Okay. Which is primarily seen in yeast, or you can say the scientific name Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Okay, and also it is used some kind of beverage production. Okay, beverages production you drink, right? So one type is alcoholic fermentation, where glucose is being produced to pyruvate, okay, in cytoplasm. Then it further lead to the production of ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. And for example, you can give the example of yeast, that is your Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and it is used in beverages production. Okay. Then another case, that is the lactic acid formation. What is that? Lactic acid formation, where lactic acid is being formed from the pyruvate. Okay. You can see in all these steps, energy is being released. Okay. In all these steps, energy is being released. It can be any living cell. Respiration's main agenda, main motto is to produce energy, because energy is required for any living organism to survive, for their own growth and development. Okay. So what did you learn? In case of anaerobic respiration, kind of two types. One is alcoholic fermentation and another is lactic acid formation. In case of lactic acid formation, it is glucose is converted into pyruvate, then it is further converted into the lactic acid and energy, right? And where it is seen in case of some kind of lactobacillus bacteria, where milk is being converted to the curd, and in another case like in our muscle cells. Okay, suppose you are running a long distance, you have run a long distance, around you decided to run for around 5 to 10 kilometers today. Okay, so have you ever noticed while you are running, okay, you cannot even breathe properly, right? You cannot even breathe properly. And while you are running, your legs muscles, hand muscles, all are active, right? The muscle cells are active, very active during the running period. So during that where the muscle cells are very active, that means muscle cells require more oxygen to produce energy, right? So you are running, even you cannot properly breathe. Your body or your muscle cells are not getting enough oxygen to meet the demand, okay, to meet the demand of oxygen that is currently needed by your body while running, right? So in that case, oxygen is being lagged, okay. In that case, during the lack of oxygen, what it happens, the pyruvate is being converted to the lactic acid in your muscle cells, and due to which further it will lead to like some muscular pumps in your body, muscular pain. You can feel muscular pain in your legs and muscles, right? Okay. So what did we learn? This lactic acid fermentation can be seen on different kind of cases, like for example, in lactobacillus bacteria, where milk is being converted to the curd, and second case is the in muscle cells, in human muscle cells, where we do strenuous activity or strenuous exercises, very heavy physical work, or very like while I gave you example of running, okay, doing exercises. In that case, when our body or muscle cells does not get enough oxygen or lack of oxygen, it is being converted to the lactic acid. So in all these cases are only meant to produce energy, and in aerobic respiration, higher amount of energy is being released, but in case of anaerobic respiration, both in lactic acid and alcoholic fermentation, less amount of energy is being released, right? So I hope you all are able to understand the basic difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration, and the kind of biochemical reactions that is occurring during this aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, I am revising further. Okay, I am telling you further about these reactions. First step during the respiration, when your cell get food in the form of glucose. Okay, remind it, there are varied kind of nutrition. A cell's first preference is monosaccharide, that is glucose. You have to remember it. Okay, when the cell gets glucose, it is being converted into the pyruvate. Glucose is a 6-carbon compound, pyruvate is a 3-carbon compound. Here the food is partially broken down. Okay, first step occurs in the cytoplasm, which is kind of common in all living organisms. Then the second, either in the presence of oxygen, which is kind of aerobic respiration, it is further reaction moved to the mitochondria, where carbon dioxide, water and energy released. In case of aerobic respiration, as you all know, higher amount of energy is released. In the absence of oxygen, two types of condition you will see, that is for lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Alcoholic fermentation seen is yeast, where ethanol is being produced along with carbon dioxide and energy. And in case of lactic acid fermentation, which is kind of seen in human muscle cells during strenuous activities or strenuous physical exercises. Due to the lack of oxygen, the food is being converted to the lactic acid and it produces energy along with the death. Okay, are you all clear about this? I hope you all are clear about the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, now we'll discuss about the parts of the respiratory system in case of human beings, right? What did I say from the very beginning of the class? That we have certain kind of the respiratory system where we inhale oxygen from the environment and exhale air or carbon dioxide towards the environment. Even I asked you, do all living organisms breathe? No, because all living organisms do not possess respiratory system. Okay, the organisms who breathe, who have certain respiratory system. Okay, so why don't you take a deep breath? Okay, so from which part of your body you are inhaling air? From your nose, right? You are inhaling from your nose, right? Okay, aapke naak ke do chhed, the holes of your nose is called nostrils. What is it called? Nostrils. Okay, what is it called? Nostrils, the opening. Okay, nostrils. That is the opening of your nose, where we inhale air into our nose. Okay, then this nose or nostrils open further into the nasal chamber or nasal passages. What is called? Then it is further opened into the nasal chamber, or you can call it nasal passage. nasal chamber and nasal passage. If you have noticed in your nose, inside, behind the nostril, okay, there are some presence of the hairs, nasal hairs, and you can also find mucus lining this nasal hair, nasal chamber and nasal passage. What is the function of this nasal hairs? These nasal hairs trap the dust particle that is present in the air we are inhaling, okay, and it filters the air. Okay, there are various of components, very impure air we are inhaling, right? It needs to be filtered out before it reach to the lungs, right? So the presence of this nasal hair is to filtrate, okay, purify the air we are inhaling. Okay, next there is another thing, that is the mucus. What did I say? Mucus. It is like some kind of gel like thing, okay, which lines the respiratory tract, and the function of this mucus is also to provide protection, the respiratory protection to the respiratory lining of our system. Okay, along with that, it traps any kind of microorganisms that enter our respiratory system. Okay, so what is the function of the nasal hair? I say it filters the air we are inhaling, and along with that, the function of mucus is to give protection to our respiratory system, right? So the first part is the nostrils, which are kind of opening, okay, opening of our nose, okay, two openings. We have two nostrils, two opening, right? Two nostrils, two opening. Then it leads to the further to the nasal chamber or nasal passage. Further behind, this is the nasal chamber and nasal passage. It is this section, okay, septum, nasal septum. It divides the nasal chamber into two separate chambers. Okay, two nostrils, two nasal chambers. Okay. Then this nasal chamber is connected to the pharynx. Okay. Further, this nasal chamber is connected to the pharynx. What is pharynx? Pharynx is a common passage for both food and wind. Okay. See, here is our nose and nasal chamber, and below it we have our oral cavity. Okay, inside our mouth, oral cavity, right? This palate, okay, the roof of the oral cavity, that is the palate. This palate separates the nasal cavity and our oral cavity. Further, this oral cavity, our mouth, and the nasal cavity is connected to the pharynx. Okay, if you have here the oral cavity and the upper side of it presence is the nasal cavity. Okay, oral cavity and nasal cavity. Okay, the separating thing, the thing that is separating oral cavity and nasal cavity is the palate. Okay, which is the roof of your mouth. Okay, touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth, that is the palate. We have hard palate and soft palate. Okay, maxilla bones. Okay, it separates the oral cavity and nasal cavity, and it is further connected towards the pharynx region, right? And pharynx is the common path for both food and wind. Common passage for both food and wind. That means in case of pharynx, both food and wind can travel. Next, come to the larynx. So what happens after pharynx? Pharynx is further converted into two parts, that is esophagus and trachea. Okay, so behind it, the pharynx posteriorly is being converted to the esophagus, and anteriorly it is being converted to the trachea. So trachea is specific for the respiratory system, that is for the passage of wind. But esophagus, you all know, is solely for the food pipe, right? Esophagus is the food pipe, and trachea is your wind pipe. Okay, trachea is your wind pipe. So what happens when the pharynx in the throat region, it is further is being converted to the esophagus, and anteriorly it leads to the trachea. Okay, anteriorly it leads to the trachea. Posteriorly it is converted to the oesophagus. Okay, which is the food pipe. And trachea is your wind pipe specific for the air. So at the beginning of the trachea, there is a specific structure called glottis and epiglottis. Okay, epiglottis, which below that presents your larynx. Below that presents your larynx. And larynx is your voice box. You call it your voice box or sound box, where your sound is being produced. So that you can speak, right? So our respiratory system starts from the nostril, then it is directed to the nasal chamber, then nasal chamber is being connected to the pharynx. Pharynx is the common passage for both food and wind. Then this pharynx region is further converted into the oesophagus, which is posteriorly on the back side of the trachea. Okay, front side it is trachea and the posterior side it is food pipe. Okay, oesophagus. Okay, in oesophagus, food particles is being transmitted to the stomach, your digestive system, and in trachea, air is being led to the lungs. Okay, so we learned about the pharynx, which is the common passage for both and food and wind. Larynx, which is called the voice box, or you can say sound box, where your sound is being produced. Then the trachea. Okay, trachea, which is the wind pipe. Okay, specific for the transportation of air. Then trachea is further divided into bronchi. Okay, see this diagram. Here's the opening of your nose, that is nostrils, two nostrils. Then it is being further converted into the nasal passage. Okay, then this nasal passage is connected to the pharynx. Right, which is the common for both food and wind. Then this pharynx will, on the back side, it leads to the oesophagus. It's through the oesophagus, which we call the food pipe. Okay, on the front side, it leads to the trachea. Okay, this is the trachea. And the beginning of the trachea, there is some presence of glottis and epiglottis. Okay, the presence of epiglottis or glottis. Epiglottis is a like flap-like structure or cap-like structure. Okay, epiglottis is a flap-like structure that prevent entry of the food particle into the respiratory system or into the trachea, right? As you all know, pharynx is the common passage for both and food and wind. Okay, to ensure that this food particle does not enter into the respiratory tract, so there is a presence of cap-like structure, that is epiglottis. It prevents this entry of the food particle into the respiratory tract or into the trachea, right? Sometimes you have feel like while eating, okay, yeah, your parents must have guided you, don't talk while eating. Why? It may cause like your food to enter into your trachea, or sometimes you cough also. Okay, so the function of epiglottis is to prevent the entry of the food particle inside the trachea, right? So below this epiglottis is the structure present, that is larynx. Okay, larynx, and the function of this larynx, you all know, it is the voice box or sound box where sound is being produced. Further, this portion is converted into the trachea. Then this trachea is being divided into two primary bronchi. Okay, this trachea or windpipe is being divided into two primary bronchi. Okay, if you have noticed, your on the back side you have a vertebral column, right? Okay, vertebral column. There are so many vertebrae, around 32 to 33 vertebrae. Like on the level of fifth thoracic vertebra, this trachea. Okay, the current has been gone. Okay, on the level of fifth thoracic vertebra, the trachea is divided into two primary bronchi. One is the left primary bronchi and right primary bronchi. Then those branchia is further divided into the bronchioles. Okay, fine branches like structures. Trachea divided into bronchi, then bronchi divided into bronchioles, branch like structure. Then the bronchioles give rise to alveoli. Okay, then the bronchioles give rise to numerous alveoles. Okay, singular form is alveolus and the plural form is alveoli. Like you can say the bunch of grapes. Okay, bunch of grapes. And this structure you can even compare to a inverted tree like structure, right? Trachea, then two primary bronchi. Okay, then it is divided into further bronchioles, then it give rise to like fruits like grapes. Okay, alveoli is like structure, and these all the structures are further divided in the lungs, right? Once it is converted into the bronchi, it enters into the lungs. So how many lungs do you have? Two lungs, right? Left lung and right lung. Okay. So the bronchi and bronchioles and these alveoli are present inside the lungs, which increase the surface area of the lungs for the efficient gaseous exchange. Okay. So if I tell you about the alveoli, which are primary site of the gaseous exchange, which type of gaseous exchange? That means the air we are inhaling, primarily the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide, I just told you, being produced in the respiratory processes. And that carbon dioxide is the metabolical waste, right? The end product of the respiration, the metabolical waste. As I said, it need to be released out, right? So we are exhaling out through the breathing process. Okay. And we are inhaling oxygen. Fresh oxygen is being supplied and the end product, waste product, carbon dioxide is being released out. And that gaseous exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide primarily occur in the alveoles or alveolar surfaces, right? And these alveoles are present around millions, like 300 millions of alveoli present in both your lungs, which help in the gaseous exchange. And this gaseous exchange occurs primarily by the process of diffusion. I am sure you all must know about the diffusion process, right? Diffusion is simply a movement of this gaseous particle from the high concentration to low concentration area. Okay, oxygen moves from the high concentration to low concentration area, and so the carbon dioxide also moves from the high concentration to low concentration area. So like it's the exchange of oxygen is being transported into our blood vessels, and it reverse transportation of the carbon dioxide from the blood vessel to the alveolar surface. Okay, so students, today we just read about the basic structures of the our respiratory system. Okay, from our nostrils, the two opening of our nose through which we inhale air to our respiratory tract, two nostrils, then nasal chambers, right? Okay, in the nostrils and nasal chambers, there is presence of fine hair-like structure, those nasal hairs, whose main function is to filtrate air. Okay, the air we are inhaling, there are so many of impurities, it needs to be filtered out. Okay, so it filters the air, nasal hairs, and there is presence of mucus in our respiratory tract or nasal passages, from the nasal passages, and the function of this mucus is to also trap the dust particles, and also it protect the respiratory line. Okay, and it also give us store some kind of immune cells. Okay, this mucus also store some kind of immune cells which also helps us in fighting different kind of infections. Okay, like cold, there are different kind of bacterial infections. It gives us immunity. So mucus special function is to protect our respiratory system Okay, protect the respiratory lining. Then for the, this is the nasal passage connected to the pharynx, where pharynx is the both common passage for the food and wind. Then pharynx is converted to the posteriorly to the esophagus, which is the food pipe. Then anteriorly it is it forms trachea. At the beginning of the trachea, there is some structures like larynx and epiglottis. Epiglottis function is like, epiglottis is a flap-like structure that prevent the entry of the food particle into the respiratory tract. And larynx function is to produce sound or produce voice box. Sorry, produce sound or voice while you are speaking, right? And the trachea, this lung tube, which is specifically called your windpipe. Okay, there is some presence of C-shaped cartilage or rings of cartilage, right, in the trachea. And the function of this rings of cartilage is to provide structural support to the your respiratory system or the windpipe. It prevents it from collapsing. As you all know, air is being continuously moved inside and outside, inside your respiratory system, inside the windpipe, right? So it prevents it when there is changes of pressure inside the respiratory tract. So when the pressure is being dropped, okay, this cartilage, rings of cartilage ensures the windpipe does not collapse during the changes in the pressure. It provides kind of structural support to the respiratory system. So these rings of cartilage present both in the trachea and the bronchi. So you will learn about the function of this rings of cartilage, right? So this trachea further divided into bronchi, bronchioles. See, we are going to learn in detail about the structures of bronchi, bronchioles, alveoles. Further, there are gaseous exchange process and the mechanism of breathing in our next class. Okay, that's it for today. We'll meet in the next class. And mind, you have to go through what I teach you today. Okay, like breathing and respiration, the basic difference, aerobic and anaerobic respiration, and the initial part of our respiratory system. Okay, the rest will discussed in our next class. Okay, just revise it. We'll meet in the next class. Thank you for today.